Hey, are we talking about Dragon Ball? I mean, Dragon Warrior today?
Oh my gosh, you're so stupid. We're talking about Dragon Quest.
Look, Rob, a slime draws near.
So, how I got my Dragon Quest cherry popped was playing the original Dragon Warrior, which I got free with my Nintendo Power Magazine subscription. I had heard of Dragon Warrior before, but I didn't know what it was about. I didn't even know it was an RPG, but it was a free game, right? So, my question is, when did the Warrior become a quest?
When did the Warrior become a quest? Watch this slide. In Japan, in 1986, a bunch of big wigs got together and created the first Dragon Quest game. You might know one of them. The artist is world-famed Dragon Ball Z creator Akira Toriyama. This is why all these things look kind of like
Dragon Ball Z.
Okay, so this isn't all from Dragon Ball GT. Got it.
No, although, as you might guess...
Bullshit, you watched that show.
Some of the characters, like Puar's little transformation where he's a little blue thing, it totally comes from Dragon Quest. Or the skeleton, the knight, that stuff comes from Dragon Quest and Dragon Warrior. So he was the artist. Yuji Horii was the producer, and he wanted to create a game. He had been playing Wizardry and Ultima, which are American computer role-playing games. And he really liked the style of navigating the quest world. Unfortunately, the Famicom and the MSX, those old systems back then, didn't really have like keyboards and mice that the average person would have. So they had to simplify the menu system greatly to where it's things like fight, walk, talk, stairs, search, things like that. Make it really simple. But they wanted to go with a fantasy type story, so that's where we came up with this Dragon Quest gameplay. The musical composer is a guy named Koichi Sugiyama, and he had done musical composition for like TV stations and things like that. He was a pretty big deal. And even though it only took him, not that long to come up with the score, the music still to this day is incredibly catchy.
Are you saying that Dragon Quest is the first console RPG to use that kind of familiar menu, like Phantasy Star style?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes. All of this is owed to this game. And even in later games like Final Fantasy and Phantasy Star and things like that, there's little homages to Dragon Quest and some of the characters and things like that.
So it is the very first turn-based system.
It is the very first turn-based RPG. You could argue it's the first actual console RPG game.
Before Final Fantasy, before Fantasy
and all
Star.
that type of stuff.
Gotcha.
And it was hugely popular in Japan. Hugely popular. Not so much in America. You were talked about the free Dragon Warrior console. So before I talk about that, why is it called Dragon Warrior in America instead of Dragon Quest? There was a tabletop game, I think it was a D&D tabletop game called Dragon Quest. So to completely bypass all of that, they're like, okay, we'll call it Dragon Warrior. So the first Dragon Quest game came out in 1986, and it took 3 years for us to get...
Yeah, I remember when it came out here.
1989 is when you could get that subscription. And Nintendo of America thought it'd sell like gangbusters, and it did not sell like gangbusters. So they had to figure out a way to get rid of old stock. So that was the point of that Nintendo Power subscription thing. I bought the game, or I asked for the game for Christmas, and Nintendo Power did like a strategy guide for it. And I carried this little strategy guide with me everywhere I went for 6 months. I just read it because it had cool Akira Toriyama art, strategies for fighting monsters, maps, all this neat stuff. That was the start of this. Dragon Quest II, it introduced multiple characters. Dragon Quest III, which is one of the best games of the series, it introduced day and night, class changes, things that we take for granted when we think about traditional RPGs. Then Dragon Quest IV, which is what my third daughter is named after, it had individual characters, 4 individual characters that started their own story, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th chapter is where you come in and all those characters came together and did a big story, a big epic thing.
Which, so Dragon Quest 1, you get, what's the name, Eldric's armor, Eldric's shield, and things like that. That's what Dragon Quest 2 is. You play the role of Eldric, right?
Sort of. It's 100 years, Dragon Quest 2 is 100 years later in the Erdrick, if you're in Japan, is Loto. Erdrick time frame. Yeah, right.
I couldn't remember
1,
Japanese
2, and
name.
3 are all in a trilogy. 4, 5, and 6 are the next trilogy, and 7, 8, 9 are sort of in a trilogy.
When did the anime come out? Because I remember there was an anime and it was released here in America too.
Yes.
Because I would wake up in the mornings and watch it. And this is before they even came out with Dragon Ball in America. They released Dragon Warrior.
Yes, there was a Dragon Warrior anime on TV in English. Do you remember that? It came on
I think it
at
was on
6
TBS.
in the morning.
It was on TBS, I think.
And all these games, because of the time with Akira Toriyama, all these games either had an animated or a manga to go with them. And again, Toriyama and Dragon Ball was super huge popular in Japan, so these games benefited from his art, from his manga, from his anime, from what have you.
And so what you're saying is while we were watching fill-in episodes of Dragon Ball Z, it's because he was making Dragon Quest.
Yes,
He's getting that money.
So 5 Namek minutes is thanks to Dragon Quest.
Exactly, because he had to draw this slime, which is very complex. But Toriyama was really cool. Like, slimes are kind of a joke now, that they're always the first monster in, like, everything. I think they're the first monster in, like, Wizardry, too. But the way Akira Toriyama drew this slime was like, okay, this is awesome. Dragon Quest V was the first Dragon Quest on the Super Famicom. The graphics themselves were better than... I'm like, I don't want to poo-poo on it. The graphics were not as good as we thought.
It?
No, it's one of the best... It might be the best Dragon Quest game. And we finally got it in English and on the DS, I believe.
Yeah, it finally came out on the DS.
It's an amazing, really, really touching, like pull at your strings type story. But when it first came out, people were like, I mean, it's sold by the butt tons in Japan, but it was like, it wasn't that much of a graphical upgrade from what the Super Famicom could do. Dragon Quest VI, however, was gorgeous and beautiful, epic score, but maybe not as rich a story as Dragon Quest V.
Here's another thing to keep in mind, too. Dragon Warrior, when it was here in America, also 1, 2, 3, and 4 were released on the Nintendo. When 5 and 6 of Dragon Quest came out in Japan, we did not get a Super Nintendo version of those games. There was no Dragon Warrior 5 and 6. It wasn't until 7, which was still Dragon Warrior, on the PlayStation.
PlayStation 1, that's right. And another footnote about that, like, as I keep saying, these games sold by the butt tons. Dragon Quest 3 sold so many copies that Enix politely decided to only release these games on the weekend because people would skip school, skip work, stand in line.
Whoa.
Like, the first time that you saw people
It's huge in Japan.
wrapping around the blocks to stand in line for games was Dragon Quest 3. It was a huge thing, so that's why Nintendo thought, okay, these games are going to sell here.
Right.
And 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the NES, they sold okay, but they just didn't sell that great. I think
For some reason,
the only people that had them.
well, yeah, and for some reason, this country has always been like, oh, Final Fantasy.
Right.
But when it came to Dragon Quest, they're like,
What was released first here? Was it Final Fantasy or was it
Dragon Warrior was released here, but Final Fantasy was very closely after because the development of Final Fantasy in Japan was after, but there had been enough time, the 3 years between the original
Right,
release.
because we always get, or used to get delayed releases.
Right. So the last Dragon Warrior game was in fact Dragon Warrior 7 for the
what I
PlayStation.
thought.
And again, it's one of those games where it was an great game, but it was 100 hours to like a short playthrough was 100 hours. It was just dense. You went between like a spirit world and a real world and a time travel, and characters would grow, and there's so much to do. And I'm not gonna say it's a bad game, but it was a little monotonous at hour 50.
well, I was thinking we were never going to get 7 and 8 on the 3DS. It took them 3 years to bring them over because, like I said, they don't sell that well.
They don't sell that well.
Whereas, like, you know, if you have a Final Fantasy game, it's either like released at the same time release or it's here in a month.
After Dragon Quest VII, this is where things really did a turnaround. Dragon Quest VIII came out, and this is the first game to actually be called Dragon Quest. The copyright for Dragon Quest that I think D&D, the tabletop game, finally expired. I think it expired a couple years earlier, but whatever.
Now, by this point, it's Square Enix, not just Enix anymore.
Yes, this is Square Enix, so they fused into one. So Square was Final Fantasy, Enix was Dragon Quest. Good friendly rivalry. Forget that. Everything comes together. They came out with Dragon Quest VIII, and this is developed by Level 5, who we know from games such as
Ni no Kuni, Professor Layton gets pussy. I always change that title, but go ahead.
Please do, thanks. Really strong development. It was in 3D, had beautiful cel-shaded graphics. It looked like the first time you saw Dragon Quest VIII on the PlayStation 2, you're like, oh my gosh.
It's a cartoon.
It's a cartoon. It's an anime. Like, I'm playing an anime. And the fights were animated. The characters were well-defined. This is totally like someone we've seen in Dragon Ball. And it was a lot.
Dragon Ball?
Dragon Ball. I'm pretty sure this character is. I think that's Lunch. Or Bulma. With boobs. Anyway, what was interesting about this title is so Square Enix went all out to make sure to release this game in America. And it's actually better. The American release is better than the Japanese release. The Japanese release didn't have voice acting, and it had digital music just from the PS2 sound processor. The American release was fully voiced, and fully voiced very, very well, like British accents and things like that. Like, very well done voice acting, and the score was re-orchestrated. So, like, the Tokyo Philharmonic, I believe, did the full orchestration. So we got an amazing version of Dragon Quest VIII, and it helped tremendously because it sold really well. Dragon Quest IX was the first game to come out for the DS, and this is a big controversial decision. Like, why would you release a mainstream Dragon Quest game on a portable? Well, Squeenix looked at the numbers. Which system has the most distribution among everywhere? Everyone, you've been to Japan. We'll get you to Japan next week. Everyone had a DS at the time.
Yeah.
So, and like all these Dragon Quest games, it was never about which one has the best stats, the best specs. No. It was always who has the most people playing the game. It was all about distribution. And that's why we got it on the PlayStation versus like the N64. And that is why Dragon Quest IX came out on the DS. And I had to say it was a smart decision because Dragon Quest IX was the first game that I got my wife into playing. We could play it together. She could pop into my game and grind monsters and what have you. It sold millions and millions of copies. Millions and millions of copies in Japan. It sold a very awesome amount here in America too. And it took advantage of the DS hardware features. It had a mode where you could close the lid and it would go into like a DS, a spot pass E. Before the 3DS came out, it was a spot pass E type thing where you close this and you'd walk around, and this worked really great in Japan because Japan is very dense, lots of people carrying their things. You'd walk around with this game closed in your pocket, and people would send you could send maps wirelessly. You didn't have to like do anything. You just walk and maps would appear, and these maps were randomly generated, and they had names like the Cavern of Fire's Skull, or whatever, just randomly generated names, and they just generated loot, randomly generated monsters or whatever.
It was pretty cool because like you could play with multiple groups of people. Not like we had a quest going, and then I had a side quest going with like my brothers, and I had a side quest going with another friend of mine that all played Dragon Quest IX. Because you build your own character, but you were still kind of doing your own quest too.
Yeah,
it was really cool. I really enjoyed Dragon Quest IX. That's kind of what brought me back into it because I kind of skipped 6, 7, and 8. I went back and played them on the DS. Yeah.
Dragon Quest X was the first. No, we're not going to talk about builders. although I'm not going to poo-poo on Dragon Quest Builders. Don't twist that.
Joker,
Dragon Quest Monsters 2. Dragon Quest Builders is actually legit.
There's also a kind of like theater rhythm of Dragon Quest that hasn't come out here yet.
Yeah, great music. Dragon Quest X is where things went a little askew. It came out on the Wii, which was hugely popular. It was the first.
Still not out here in America, by the way.
It is the first massively multiplayer version of Dragon Quest, and so I had talked about how much text there's in some of these games. There's a lot of text in Dragon Quest X, and there's also upgrades. I bought the Wii U version of it that has all 3 packages. It is not very likely that we'll ever see Dragon Quest X in America, which is a shame because it really does some really cool, fun things, different from like Final Fantasy 11 and 14. Like, it's a great game, lots of cool battle systems, but we probably won't be able to see it.
So, if there's a game that someone who's new to Dragon Quest could get into, which game would you suggest?
This is a very difficult question because
one game that, say, Dan or I should start with.
I really think 9 is the game to get people on it because it's a multiplayer game that you and your wife could play together.
How many people are playing it now?
You and your wife.
How long ago did it come out?
Yeah, Dragon Quest IX is one of those games. There's still people playing
it. But it's still a fun game because you don't have to play it like that. That's just the option to play it with a multiplayer. There's still a pretty decent mode where you can make your character
pretty decent.
So I go with Dragon Quest Builders, huh?
What the hell?
No, Dragon Quest IX is that's a pretty daggone good suggestion because, like Omar said, you and your wife can play it together.
My wife will not play any held hit.
Okay, well,
it's too small for her fat fingers.
You can get the big DS, or you can play on the 3DS. The 3DS is big. You can get the big 3DS because all DS games play on the 3DS just fine, and you can scale it.
She's still on Skyrim. Come on.
My wife, who is not a gamer, went through this game. Not only did she beat it, she also grind all her characters to level 9. So if my wife is not a gamer and she beat the crap out of this game, I have hope for your wife too. All right. Okay. So Dragon Quest IX is a pretty good example. I was probably going to say, as far as story is concerned, probably the best story is Dragon Quest V on the DS.
Really?
Right there. The story on that is really good.
I liked it. I liked 4 better though. I think 4 is probably one of my favorites.
4 is one of my favorites too. I do like the Rich Arc. I mean, again, I named my kid Dragon Quest 4, so after Princess Arena.
He really didn't. But go ahead.
The other one that is really, really, really good is Dragon Quest 3. Dragon Quest 3 had a really strong story.
I like the characters in 3.
The characters in 3, the new classes, the
So do you ever fight Goku?
I'm glad you brought this up for once. I know you said something stupid, but I'm glad you brought this up. No offense to you. Dragon
Other
Quest.
than the obvious offense.
Yeah, sorry. Dragon Quest 8 with this guy, right? One of the cool battle systems they introduced in Dragon Quest was like tense mode, right? Where you can
Everybody calls it
skip
Super
a turn.
Saiyan mode.
No. You skip a turn and like you go and his stats increase. But if you did it enough, and after a certain point in the game, it would go and it would spin around and he had golden hair. He turned Super Saiyan, and then you could do this Majestic of the Dragon attack, and it was the most amazing thing. So yes, you could be Super Saiyan Goku in Dragon Quest 8.
Another thing about 9, it's cool. Like you go into one of the. It's like an online room, but all the characters from the previous Dragon Quests are in there, and they're selling armor and things like that. It's always like that when these stories are kind of interconnected in a way.
Homage to the
they
prior
absolutely. So what has not come out yet is Dragon Quest 11. This is a game I'm super duper excited for because
it just came out in Japan.
Came out in Japan. It came out in July. And it is a culmination of everything. And what's cool about Dragon Quest 11 is it goes all the way back to Dragon Quest 1. It has all kinds of little mini things to do from all the lineage of all the other games. It's for the PS4 and the 3DS. And it's the same game on the PS4 and the 3DS. Obviously, the PS4 looks beautiful.
Better.
The 3DS still has 3D. It looks really, really, really good.
Yeah, but the 3DS has the classic map mode at the bottom that looks like Dragon Warrior 1.
That's exactly
Dragon Quest 1.
Yeah, so you can play, don't say Warrior ever again. So you can play Dragon Quest 11 in 2D, like 8-bit mode on your 3DS, or in 3D mode on the 3DS, or you can play it beautifully on the PS4. It's the same game across everything. In Japan, they came up with a giant box set that came with Erdrick's. Okay, it did not come with Erdrick Loto's sword, but the box, it had the box of the sword on it. It was a double pack of a storybook of both editions. So me being super horror, like I really wanted to buy the Japanese version of the double box set for like almost $200, but I did not buy that. But it is supposed to be coming out in 2018. And you need to definitely play some of these games now, because when Dragon Quest 11 comes out, it's going to destroy everything. I've been trying to stay spoiler free as much as I can about this game. But everyone who I have listened to, heard, talked about it in person or whatever, has talked about this game, it is the best Dragon Quest, period, full stop. For story, gameplay, characterization, like everything destroys everything, especially if you're a Dragon Quest person. So, run out to your local GameStop store and go pick up some Dragon Quest games. Thank you for watching Near Mint Condition. Dragon Quest is very near and dear to my heart, so I hope we have encouraged you to check out one of the games. Which one is your favorite Dragon Quest? If you agree or disagree, let us know in the comments. If you want to learn more about the Dragon Quest games, be sure to check out the notes. We have extensive notes on how you can get caught up on Dragon Quest 1 through 11. Can't wait! See you next time. Thank you very much. Like and subscribe and share.
Poof! 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 Have you ever felt a pair as warm and soft as mine? Oh, just relax and enjoy. Voilà! Le pouf pouf!
These little guys look like they're in Dragon Ball.
It's cute. That's so sorry. Look at it. It's like some damn Muppet thing. It's just staring at me. It's like some oven mitt with pies. You two can have your own oven mitt.
You're still going.
We've lost it. It's just tickles.